The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with quiet satisfaction as hundreds of alien representatives watched the holographic display showing Earth's blue marble floating in space. Ambassador Zeltar stood at the center podium, his crystalline body reflecting the harsh white lights that illuminated the circular hall. His multiple eyes focused on the human delegation seated in the lower section. Separated from the main assembly by a clear energy barrier, Commander Jake Morrison sat perfectly still in his chair, his weathered face showing no emotion as he listened to the aliens discuss humanity's fate. The trade negotiations had not gone well. Earth had refused to accept the Council's terms for colonial expansion rights, and Jake had made the mistake of demanding equal representation for human settlements. The alien species did not appreciate being challenged by what they considered a primitive race that had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel. Council leader Vorthak raised one of his forearms and the chamber fell silent. His species, the hegemony, had ruled the galactic government for over 3,000 years, and his word carried the weight of absolute authority. The massive creature's skin shifted from deep purple to bright red, indicating his displeasure with the current situation. The humans have proven themselves to be aggressive and unreasonable during these negotiations, Vorthak announced, his voice echoing through the chamber's acoustic systems. They refuse our generous offer of limited colonial rights and demand treatment as equals despite their obvious inferiority. Jake felt his jaw tighten but remained silent. Around him, the other human delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had come to the Council hoping to secure better conditions for Earth's growing population and expanding colonies, but it was becoming clear that the aliens had other plans. Zeltar stepped forward, holding a data crystal that glowed with soft blue light. We have decided to give humanity one final chance to prove their worth to the galactic community, he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. If they succeed, Earth will be granted full membership in the Council with all the rights and privileges that entails. The human delegates exchanged glances, sensing that whatever came next would not be good news. Jake leaned forward in his chair, his military training keeping him alert and ready for whatever challenge the aliens were about to present. We are assigning humanity to establish a successful colony on Kepler 438c. Vorthak continued, and several alien species in the chamber made sounds that Jake assumed were expressions of amusement or satisfaction. You will have one standard galactic year to create a functioning settlement with at least 50 permanent residents. Dr. Lisa Carter, the expedition's chief scientist, accessed her portable computer and quickly pulled up information about the planet. Her face went pale as she read the atmospheric and surface conditions. She leaned over to whisper to Jake, but he was already studying his own data display. Kepler-438c was classified as a Class 0 death world, the most dangerous category in the galactic settlement system. Surface temperatures regularly reached 180 degrees Celsius during the day and dropped to -50 at night. The atmosphere was composed primarily of sulfuric acid vapor with trace amounts of methane and hydrogen sulfide. Seismic activity was constant, with major earthquakes occurring daily. Radiation levels from the planet's unstable star were high, enough to kill most known species within hours of exposure. The Zephyrian Empire attempted to establish an outpost on this world 15 years ago, Zeltar added with what Jake thought might be satisfaction. Their entire expedition of 200 highly trained colonists perished within 3 planetary rotations. Even the Krillian Mining Consortium, known throughout the galaxy for their ability to work in extreme conditions, declared the planet completely unsurvivable. Jake stood up slowly, his 6-foot frame impressive even among the various alien species. Present? And if we refuse this assignment? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Vorthak's skin shifted to a deeper shade of red. Then humanity will be banned from all galactic trade routes and forbidden from expanding beyond your current solar system. Your species will remain isolated until you learn proper respect for your superiors. The chamber erupted in what Jake assumed were alien expressions of approval. He could see representatives from dozens of species nodding their various heads or making gestures of agreement. It was clear that the Council had already decided humanity's fate, and this was merely a formality designed to give them the appearance of fairness. Jake looked back at his team, Dr. Lisa. Carter was still reading. Through the planetary data, her scientific mind already working on the challenges they would face. Engineer Pete Johnson was making notes on his tablet, probably calculating what kind of equipment they would need. Pilot Amy Rodriguez sat with her arms crossed, her expression showing the same stubborn determination that had made her one of Earth's best atmospheric flight commanders. "We accept the challenge," Jake announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Several aliens made sounds of surprise, apparently expecting the humans to refuse or beg for a different assignment. Vorthak leaned forward on his massive throne. "You understand the conditions of this assignment? You must establish a functioning colony with at least 50 residents within one galactic standard year. Failure means permanent isolation for your species." "We understand," Jake replied calmly. "When do we leave?" Zeltar consulted his data crystal. "Transport will be provided within 30 planetary rotations. You may select your colonists from Earth's population, but the total number cannot exceed 50 individuals for the initial settlement. Additional supplies and personnel may be sent later if the colony survives the first year." As the council session ended and the aliens began filing out of the chamber, Jake gathered his team around him. The energy barrier separating them from the main assembly flickered and disappeared, but they remained in their section, discussing the impossible task they had just accepted. "Sir," Dr. Carter said quietly, "the atmospheric composition alone should kill us within minutes of landing. The sulfuric acid concentration is beyond anything we've ever dealt with." Pete Johnson looked up from his calculations. "The seismic activity makes standard construction impossible. We'd need to build everything underground, but the ground temperature is hot enough to melt most metals." Amy Rodriguez cracked her knuckles, a nervous habit from her military days. "Getting there won't be the problem. Staying alive once we arrive will be." Jake nodded, understanding the magnitude of what they faced. "They're sending us there to die," he said simply. "But if we somehow manage to succeed, we secure humanity's future among the stars. That's worth any risk." 3 months after leaving Earth, the transport ship Endeavour approached the nightmare world of Kepler 438c. Through the reinforced viewports of the ship's observation deck, the planet looked exactly like the biblical descriptions of hell that Jake Morrison remembered from his childhood. Thick clouds of yellow and green gases swirled around the planet's surface, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. Lightning storms raged continuously across the dayside, visible even from their current distance of 50,000 kilometers. Amy Rodriguez sat in the pilot's chair, her hands steady on the controls despite the ship's increasing vibration as they entered the planet's outer atmosphere. She had flown through combat zones and asteroid fields, but nothing had prepared her for this. The ship's hull was already beginning to heat up from the planet's intense radiation, and they were still hours away from landing. "Atmospheric entry in 10 minutes, Amy announced over the ship's communication system. "All personnel need to be in full environmental suits from this point forward. No exceptions." Dr. Lisa Carter monitored her instruments from the science station, watching as the atmospheric readings climbed to levels that should have been impossible for any world to sustain. "External temperature is currently 165 degrees Celsius and rising," she reported. "Acid rain is already beginning to eat through our outer hull coating." The 50 colonists had spent the 3-month journey preparing for this moment, but seeing the reality of their destination made all their training seem inadequate. Environmental engineer Ben Clark checked and rechecked his equipment readings, hoping to find some error in the data that would make their situation less desperate. "The atmospheric pressure is 3 times Earth normal," Ben reported. "The sulfuric acid concentration is so high that our protective suits will only last 6 hours maximum before the seals begin to fail." Jake moved through the ship, checking on each team member and ensuring that everyone was properly suited up for the landing. The environmental suits were the most advanced that Earth technology could produce, but they were designed for exploration missions lasting days. not permanent habitation on a world that seemed designed to kill anything that dared to set foot. On its surface, Dr. Sam Mitchell, the expedition's xenobiologist, was studying readings from the planet's surface through the ship's long-range scanners. "I'm detecting some interesting patterns in the atmospheric composition," he said. "There are trace elements that suggest some form of chemical activity beyond simple geological processes." Construction foreman Rick Davis and his crew were securing the landing equipment and supply pods that would be dropped ahead of the main ship. These supplies represented everything they would need to survive their first months on the planet, assuming they lived long enough to reach them. "Pod 7 just lost its heat shielding," Rick reported as he watched his instruments. "We're going to lose about 10% of our construction materials before we even land." The ship shuddered violently as it hit the planet's middle atmosphere, and several colonists grabbed onto nearby supports to keep from being thrown to the floor. The external cameras showed a world that defied description. Twisted rock formations jutted from ground that seemed to pulse with underground heat. Geysers of boiling liquid shot from cracks in the surface, creating temporary fountains that reached hundreds of meters into the toxic air. "Landing site is directly ahead," Amy announced, fighting to keep the ship stable in the violent atmospheric currents. "It's not going to be gentle, people. Brace for impact." The landing was rougher than anyone had hoped. One of their supply pods was torn from its parachute by a gust of superheated wind and crashed into a field of volcanic glass several kilometers away from their designated landing zone. As the ship's engines finally shut down and the colonists prepared to disembark, the reality of their situation became clear. Through the ship's cameras, they could see their new home. The landscape looked like something from another dimension. The ground was covered in a mixture of volcanic rock and crystallized minerals that reflected the planet's dim sunlight in strange colors. Steam rose from cracks in the earth, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with heat and toxic gases. "External temperature is now 172 degrees Celsius, Lisa reported. "The radiation levels are climbing as the local star rises higher in the sky." The colonists gathered at the ship's main exit, each person carrying the maximum amount of equipment they could manage in the heavy environmental suits. Jake looked at the faces behind the reinforced helmet visors and saw the same mixture of fear and determination that he felt himself. "Remember the plan?" Jake said over the suit communication system. "We establish a base camp in the lava tubes we identified. From orbit, everything else is secondary to finding shelter and getting our life support systems operational." The airlock cycled open, and the first humans stepped onto the surface of Kepler 438c. The planet's gravity was slightly higher than Earth's, making movement in the bulky suits even more difficult. Within minutes, warning lights began flashing on several suit displays as the acidic atmosphere started attacking the protective seals. Pete Johnson led a group toward the cave system they had identified as their best chance for shelter. The natural lava tubes had been formed by ancient volcanic activity and offered protection from both the surface conditions and the deadly radiation that made extended surface exposure impossible. "The tubes extend at least 500 meters underground," Pete reported as his team reached the cave entrance. "Temperature drops significantly as we go deeper, and the rock formations should provide natural shielding from radiation." Moving their equipment from the landing site to the caves proved to be a challenge that tested every aspect of their preparation. The combination of extreme heat, toxic atmosphere, and unstable ground made each trip dangerous. Several colonists had to return to the ship when their suit systems began showing signs of failure. Rick Davis and his construction crew worked to establish their first temporary shelter inside the largest lava tube. The natural rock formations provided some protection, but they still needed to set up air filtration systems and thermal regulation equipment to make the space livable. "We're losing suit integrity faster than expected," Ben Clark reported. "The acid levels are higher than our simulations predicted. We need to get everyone inside within the next 2 hours." As the planet's sun reached its highest point in the toxic sky, the surface temperature climbed above 180 degrees Celsius. Even through their protective suits and the ship's environmental systems, the colonists could feel the oppressive heat. Emergency alarms began sounding as several suit systems reached critical failure points, the race to establish their underground base became a matter of survival measured in hours rather than days. Teams worked in short shifts, spending no more than 30 minutes on the surface, before rotating back to the ship to allow their suits to cool down and recharge their filtration systems. Dr. Sam Mitchell made the first discovery that gave them hope. While taking readings inside the lava tubes, he detected traces of water vapor and chemical compounds that suggested the possibility of underground reservoirs. "There's definitely water down here," Sam reported from deep inside the cave system. "It's superheated and probably contaminated, but it's water. That means we might be able to establish a more permanent base than we initially thought." That first night, huddled in the makeshift shelter they had constructed inside the lava tubes, the 50 colonists listened to the sounds of their new world. Violent storms raged on the surface above them, and the constant rumble of seismic activity reminded them that the planet was far from stable. Jake looked around at his team and realized that they had already accomplished something remarkable. They were still alive after their first day on a world that had killed every previous expedition within hours of landing. 2 months after landing on Kepler 438c, the human colony had undergone changes that would have shocked the Galactic Council members who had sentenced them to this death world. The aliens assumed the humans were already dead, their bones scattered across the toxic landscape like so many previous expeditions. They were wrong. Dr. Lisa Carter made her discovery during the colony's 6th week on the planet. While collecting samples from the superheated pools that formed near the underground thermal vents, she noticed something that contradicted everything she thought she knew about life in extreme environments. The extremophile bacteria she had brought from Earth were not just surviving in the acidic water. They were thriving and multiplying at rates that seemed impossible. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa called from her makeshift laboratory deep in the lava tube system. She had set up her equipment in a natural chamber where the temperature was only 95 degrees Celsius, almost comfortable compared to the surface conditions. Jake Morrison climbed down from the main living area, moving carefully through the narrow passages that connected their underground chambers. The colony had expanded their base considerably since those first desperate days, carving out living spaces and workshops from the natural rock formations. Lisa pointed to her microscope display, which showed magnified images of the bacterial colonies. "These organisms are processing the sulfuric compounds in the water," she explained excitedly. "They're breaking down the acid and producing oxygen as a waste product." Jake studied the data on her screen, his military mind immediately grasping the implications. How much oxygen are we talking about? If we can cultivate these bacteria on a large scale, we could create biofilters that actually clean the air around our living spaces, Lisa said. We wouldn't need to rely entirely on our mechanical life. Support systems. Dr. Sam Mitchell had been working on a related problem in another part of the cave system. The planet's extreme conditions were creating evolutionary pressure on Earth organisms that was unlike anything in the scientific literature. Plants and bacteria that would normally take millions of years to adapt were showing significant changes within weeks. "The radiation levels are actually accelerating genetic mutations," Sam explained to a group of colonists gathered in their main meeting chamber. "But instead of killing the organisms, the mutations are helping them survive in this environment." Engineer Pete Johnson had been dealing with more practical concerns. The constant seismic activity that made surface construction impossible had given him an idea that went against everything he had learned about building structures. Instead of fighting the planet's instability, he was learning to work with it. "We don't build rigid structures here," Pete explained to his engineering team as they worked in one of the deeper chambers. "We create flexible systems that move with the planet instead of breaking against it." He led them to a section where he had been experimenting with construction techniques that used the planet's own geological features. The lava tubes formed a natural network of connected chambers and passages that extended for kilometers underground. By modifying these existing structures instead of creating new ones, they could build a city that was integrated with the planet itself. Construction foreman Rick Davis had initially been skeptical of Pete's ideas, but the results spoke for themselves. His crew had learned to work during the planet's brief cool periods when surface temperatures dropped to what they now considered a pleasant 120 degrees Celsius. They developed techniques for shaping the volcanic rock using controlled explosions and the natural thermal expansion that occurred as the planet heated and cooled. The rock is actually easier to work with when it's hot, Rick explained to a group of new arrivals who had come on the second supply ship. We use the planet's own heat to soften it, then shape it while its flexible environmental engineer. Ben Clark had revolutionized their water supply system by creating a complex network of condensation chambers that captured moisture from the superheated atmosphere. The system used multiple stages of filtration and cooling to turn the toxic atmospheric vapor into clean drinking water. The planet gives us everything we need, Ben said as he showed the system to Dr. Carter. We just have to be creative about how we extract it. The breakthrough in air purification came when Lisa's bacterial cultures reached critical mass in month 3. She had been cultivating the organisms in specially designed tanks that mimicked the natural thermal pools where she had first discovered them. The bacteria not only neutralized the sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, but actually produced oxygen at a rate that exceeded their consumption. We're actually getting breathable air. In the main living chambers, Lisa announced during one of their weekly progress meetings, the oxygen content is up to 18%, compared to 21% on Earth. Amy Rodriguez had been working on transportation solutions that would allow them to travel between their underground chambers and the surface during emergencies. She developed a system of pressurized tunnels that connected to the main lava tube network, allowing colonists to move around without being exposed to the deadly surface conditions. We can reach any part of our settlement within 10 minutes, Amy explained as she demonstrated the tunnel system. And if we need to evacuate quickly, these passages lead to 3 different surface exits, the agricultural program began showing. Success in month 4 when Mary Thompson, a botanist who had joined the second wave of colonists, managed to grow their first successful crop using a combination of earth seeds and the planet's unique mineral content. The superheated soil, when properly treated and filtered, contained nutrients that produced vegetables with nutritional profiles that actually exceeded Earth standards. The mineral content here is incredible, Mary explained as she showed off their first harvest of modified tomatoes. These plants are getting nutrients that simply don't exist in Earth soil by the end of their 4th month. The colony had established a routine that would have been unimaginable during those first desperate weeks. Colonists worked in shifts, taking advantage of the planet's day-night cycle to maximize their productivity while minimizing exposure to the most extreme conditions. The underground city had grown to include workshops, where Rick's construction crews fabricated tools and equipment from local materials. Pete's engineering teams had created geothermal power systems that generated more electricity than the colony could use. Lisa's biological laboratories were producing air and water purification systems that were actually more efficient than the technology they had brought from Earth. Dr. Sam Mitchell had begun documenting the changes that were occurring not just in their imported organisms but in the human colonists themselves. Extended exposure to the planet's unique conditions was causing subtle adaptations that seemed to be improving their ability to survive in the extreme environment. We're actually becoming better suited to life here, Sam reported during a communication session with Earth. Lung capacity is increasing, heat tolerance is improving, and we're developing natural resistance to some of the atmospheric toxins. Jake Morrison stood in the main chamber of their underground city and looked around at what his people had accomplished. The space that had once been a natural cave was now a thriving community center with living areas, workshops, and even recreational facilities. The air was breathable without environmental suits, the temperature was comfortable, and the sound of human voices and activity had replaced the oppressive silence of those first weeks. Most remarkably, The colonists were no longer just surviving on Kepler 438c, they were beginning to change the planet itself, creating pockets of livable environment that expanded a little more each day as their biological and technological systems reached into new areas of the underground network. 6 months after landing on the death world of Kepler 438c, the human colony had accomplished something that defied every law of planetary science known to the galactic community. They had not merely survived on a Class 0 Hellworld, they had begun to terraform it from the inside out. Dr. Lisa Carter stood at the edge of what had once been a toxic thermal pool and breathed deeply without an environmental suit. The air around her was not only safe to breathe, but actually cleaner than the atmosphere in many Earth cities. Her bacterial colonies had spread throughout the underground water systems, creating a network of biological air purifiers that was transforming the planet's atmosphere one chamber at a time. The atmospheric composition in our primary settlement area has shifted by 12% in our favor over the past month, Lisa reported to Jake Morrison during their weekly progress meeting. At this rate, we'll have surface breathable air. Within 2 years, Jake nodded as he reviewed the reports from each department head. What he was reading seemed impossible even to him, and he had lived through every day of their transformation from desperate survivors to thriving colonists. The underground city of Haven, as they had named their settlement, now housed over 200 people who had arrived in subsequent supply ships from Earth. Engineer Pete Johnson had perfected their geothermal energy systems to the point where they were generating enough power to supply a city 10 times their size. The planet's constant seismic activity, which had initially seemed like their greatest enemy, had become their most valuable resource. Every earthquake and thermal shift fed energy into their collection systems. We're not just meeting our power needs, Pete announced proudly. We're generating enough surplus energy to begin surface operations on a scale we never thought possible. The surface operations Pete referred to were perhaps the most remarkable achievement of the human colonists. Construction foreman Rick Davis and his crews had begun building structures above ground that were designed to work with the planet's extreme conditions rather than resist them. These buildings swayed with earthquakes, expanded and contracted with temperature changes, and actually used the planet's harsh environment as part of their structural integrity. The key was stopping our fight against the planet, Rick explained to a group of visiting engineers from Earth. Once we started building with Kepler 438c instead of despite it, everything became possible. The agricultural program had exceeded even Mary Thompson's most optimistic projections. The hydroponic gardens that filled several of the larger underground chambers were producing crops that not only fed the growing population but created surplus food that was being shipped back to Earth. The combination of the planet's unique mineral content and the controlled growing conditions had created vegetables and grains with nutritional profiles that were revolutionizing Earth's understanding of plant biology. We're growing food that's literally impossible to produce on Earth, Mary said as she walked through gardens that stretched for hundreds of meters through connected cave systems. The mineral content here is creating proteins and vitamins that don't exist in our home soil. Dr. Sam Mitchell had made perhaps the most significant discovery of all when he began analyzing the new mineral formations that were being created by the planet's extreme conditions. The combination of intense heat, pressure, and chemical activity was producing materials with properties that were unknown to galactic science. We're sitting on the largest deposit of ultra-dense thermal crystals in known space, Sam explained to the colony's leadership council. These materials could revolutionize spacecraft construction, energy storage, and a dozen other technologies. The implications of Sam's discovery extended far beyond their immediate survival needs. The crystals he had identified were forming naturally, in areas where their bacterial purification systems intersected with the planet's geothermal activity. In effect, their terraforming efforts were creating valuable resources as a side effect of making the planet livable. Environmental engineer Ben Clark had expanded their water reclamation systems to cover an area of nearly 50 square kilometers around their main settlement. The network of condensation chambers and filtration systems was producing clean water at a rate that supported not only their growing population but extensive industrial operations as well. We have more clean water available than most Earth cities, Ben reported. And the system is entirely self-sustaining, powered by geothermal energy and maintained by the bacterial colonies Amy Rodriguez had become the head of. Haven's expanding transportation network, which now included surface vehicles designed specifically for the planet's harsh conditions. Her team had developed aircraft that could operate in the acidic atmosphere and ground vehicles that used the planet's seismic activity to assist with propulsion. "We're not just surviving the environment anymore," Amy said as she demonstrated one of their new surface transports. "We're using it to our advantage." The most remarkable change in the colony was visible in the colonists themselves. Extended exposure to Kepler 438c's unique conditions had triggered adaptive changes in human physiology that were being studied by medical researchers throughout the galaxy. The colonists were developing increased lung capacity, improved heat tolerance, and natural resistance to atmospheric toxins that would have been fatal to unmodified humans. Dr. Patricia Wells, the colony's chief medical officer, had documented these changes in detail. "We're witnessing human evolution in real time," she explained in her reports to Earth's medical community. The adaptive changes we're seeing normally take thousands of generations to develop. The social structure of Haven had evolved as well. Jake Morrison had been elected as the colony's first mayor, but the government operated more like a cooperative than a traditional hierarchy. Every major decision was made by consensus among the department heads, and every colonist had a voice in determining their community's future. "We learned early that survival here depends on everyone contributing their expertise," Jake explained to a documentary crew that had arrived from Earth. "Traditional command structures don't work when everyone's knowledge is essential to keeping everyone else alive." The economic impact of Haven's success was being felt throughout human space. The minerals and materials they were producing were commanding premium prices on Earth and in the few alien markets that were willing to trade with humans. More importantly, their terraforming techniques were being studied for application on other worlds that had previously been considered uninhabitable. "We've proven that the classification system the Galactic Council uses is fundamentally flawed," explained Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a planetary scientist who had come to study Haven's transformation methods. "They look at worlds as static environments, but we've shown that with the right approach, any world can be made livable." The underground city itself had become a marvel of engineering that attracted visitors from across human space. The network of connected chambers and passages now extended for over 10 kilometers in all directions from the original landing site. Each section served a specific purpose, from residential areas to industrial facilities to recreational spaces, where colonists could relax and socialize. One of the most popular areas was the observation deck that Pete Johnson's team had constructed. In a natural chamber that extended close to the surface, through reinforced transparent panels, colonists could watch the storms and seismic activity that raged above them while remaining in perfect safety and comfort. "It's humbling to watch the power of this world," said colonist Robert Chun as he stood in the observation deck. "But it's also inspiring to know that we've learned to work with that power instead of being destroyed by it." The communication systems that connected Haven to Earth carried regular reports of their progress, but the most important messages were the personal communications from colonists to their families back home. These messages told the real story of their transformation from desperate refugees to proud pioneers. "We're not the same people who left Earth 8 months ago," wrote colonist Diana Foster in a letter to her sister. "We're stronger, more resourceful, and more united than we ever thought possible." As their first year on Kepler 438c approached its end, the colonists of Haven looked forward to the Galactic Council's inspection with confidence rather than fear. The Galactic Council's monitoring station had not bothered to check on Kepler 438c for 8 months. After all, no known species had ever survived more than a few rotations on the Death World, and the Council members had more pressing matters to attend to than confirming the obvious deaths of 50 troublesome humans. When the routine automated scanners finally swept the planet's surface as part of their annual survey, The readings were so completely impossible that the technicians assumed their equipment had malfunctioned. Ambassador Zeltar received the report in his crystalline tower on the Council homeworld, expecting to read a brief confirmation that the human colony had failed as predicted. Instead, he found himself staring at atmospheric data that contradicted everything the Council knew about planetary science. Large areas of Kepler 438c were showing oxygen concentrations that approached breathable levels. Surface temperature. Readings indicated zones of moderate climate that should not have existed on a Class 0 death world. "This cannot be accurate," Zeltar muttered to his aide. A smaller crystalline being whose multiple eyes flickered with confusion. "Run a complete diagnostic on all monitoring equipment immediately when the diagnostics confirm that their instruments were functioning perfectly." Zeltar found himself facing a possibility that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. He immediately contacted Council Leader Vorthak, who responded to the news with the kind of silence that indicated deep thought rather than simple disbelief. "Prepare a full scientific survey team," Vorthak ordered after reviewing the data himself. "I will personally lead the investigation." 3 weeks later, the Council survey ship approached Kepler 438c, with instruments that were far more sophisticated than the automated monitoring systems. What they detected from orbit was so extraordinary that several alien scientists requested permission to return to their homeworlds, rather than face the implications of what they were seeing. The planet that their records indicated was a barren hellscape now showed clear signs of organized development. Geometric patterns on the surface suggested construction activities. Atmospheric readings confirmed the presence of breathable air in expanding zones around what appeared to be settlement areas. Most shocking of all, their biological scanners were detecting a thriving ecosystem where none should have been possible. "How is this possible?" asked Dr. Gelman, a hegemony atmospheric specialist whose expertise was considered unquestionable throughout the galaxy. "Our models indicate that this world should have become more hostile over time, not less." Vorthak studied the readings with growing concern. If the humans had somehow succeeded in making Kepler 438c habitable, it would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. Species that had been dismissed as primitive might need to be reconsidered as potential threats to the established order. The shuttle that descended through Kepler 438c's atmosphere encountered conditions that bore no resemblance to their historical data. The acidic storms that should have destroyed their craft within minutes were nowhere to be found. The temperature readings showed a pleasant climate that was well within the comfort range of most galactic species. The atmospheric composition was not only non-toxic but actually cleaner than the air on many. Council HOMEWORLDS. Jake Morrison met them at the landing pad that had been constructed on the surface of what the colonists now called Haven City. He was not wearing an environmental suit, a fact that caused several of the alien scientists to check their atmospheric readings multiple times. Behind him, human children played in gardens that defied every law of planetary biology that the Council had spent millennia establishing. "Welcome to Haven," Jake said simply, his voice carrying clearly through the clean air. "We've been expecting you." Vorthak's massive form emerged from the shuttle, his skin shifting through colors that indicated profound confusion and growing alarm. The other Council members and scientists followed, each one carrying detection equipment that was providing readings they could not accept as accurate. "This is impossible," Zeltar stated, his crystalline structure refracting the sunlight that was streaming through an atmosphere that should have been toxic to all known life forms. "Our records clearly indicate that this planet is uninhabitable. Class 0 death world status with conditions that are fatal to all carbon-based organisms," was corrected Dr. Lisa Carter as she approached the alien delegation. She was carrying a tablet that contained atmospheric and biological data spanning the entire year of human habitation. "We've spent the past 12 months proving that your classification systems aren't absolute truths." The tour that followed challenged everything the alien visitors thought they knew about planetary development and species adaptation. They were shown the bacterial processing facilities that had transformed the atmosphere, the geothermal power systems that provided unlimited clean energy, and the underground city that housed thousands of human colonists in perfect comfort and safety. Pete Johnson demonstrated their seismic adaptive architecture, showing how human engineers had learned to work with the planet's natural forces rather than against them. Ben Clark displayed mineral samples that made the alien scientists' detection equipment malfunction from sheer excitement at the discovery of previously unknown materials. The thermal crystals alone represent a technological breakthrough that could revolutionize space travel, explained Dr. Sam Mitchell as he showed the delegation through their materials processing facility. But they're just one of dozens of new compounds we've discovered. The agricultural areas particularly impressed the alien visitors. Mary Thompson led them through hydroponic gardens that were producing food with nutritional profiles that exceeded anything available on the Council homeworlds. Plants that should have died within minutes of exposure to Kepler 438Cs. Original conditions were thriving in ways that suggested entirely new possibilities for planetary development. We're growing varieties of food that are literally impossible to produce anywhere else, Mary explained as she handed samples to the astonished scientists. The unique mineral content here creates nutritional combinations that don't exist on any other known world. Dr. Patricia Wells provided perhaps the most shocking revelation when she presented her medical data showing the adaptive changes occurring in the human colonists. We're witnessing evolutionary adaptation happening in real time, she explained. The humans living here are developing enhanced capabilities that make them perfectly suited to this environment. As the day progressed and the alien delegation saw more of what the humans had accomplished, the implications became clear to even the most conservative council members. This was not simply a case of survival against impossible odds. The humans had fundamentally transformed a death world into a paradise and were using it as a base for technological and biological developments. That could change the entire galaxy. How? Was all Council leader Vorthak could manage when the tour concluded, and he found himself standing in Haven's main plaza, breathing clean air and watching human families enjoy recreational activities on a world that should have killed them all within hours. Jake Morrison's answer was delivered with quiet confidence. You sent us to a world you thought would kill us, but humans don't see death worlds the way you do. We see potential. We see challenges that make us stronger, resources that make us richer, and opportunities that prove that the impossible is just another word for something we haven't tried yet. Amy Rodriguez, now serving as Haven's administrator for interplanetary relations, stepped forward to address the delegation directly. You wanted to test our worthiness for council membership by sending us here to die. Instead, we've built something that proves the council's fundamental assumptions about planetary habitability are wrong. The economic data that the humans presented was perhaps most disturbing to the council delegation. Haven was not only self-sufficient but was producing materials and technologies that were commanding premium prices throughout human space. Their terraforming techniques were being studied for application on dozens of other worlds that had previously been written off as uninhabitable. Within 5 years, we estimate that human colonies will be established on at least 20 worlds that your council has classified as death worlds, explained Dr. Elena Rodriguez, Haven's chief economist. Each one will follow the model we've developed here, turning hostile environments into thriving communities. As the council delegation prepared to return to their ship, Vorthak made one final attempt to salvage the situation. The Galactic Council is prepared to offer Earth full membership with preferred trading status and territorial rights to 3 additional star systems. Jake Morrison's response was polite but firm. We appreciate the offer, but we've learned something important during our time here. We don't need your permission to succeed, and we don't need your approval to expand. When you're ready to treat humanity as equals rather than subjects to be tested, you know where to find us. The humans of Haven had done far more than survive their punishment. They had turned what was meant to be a death sentence into a declaration of independence, proving that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers, but their absolute refusal to accept that something could not be done.